Wait.
Hey, Chris. How's it going, buddy? You can answer. There's an intercom in the room.
Where's Rose?
Oh, you dirty dog. Now, you're one of the lucky ones, trust me. Jeremy's wrangling method sounds way less pleasant. I'm supposed to answer any outstanding questions, concerns you may have so far. Apparently, our common understanding of the process has a positive impact on the success rate of the procedure. You could give a shit, right? Okay. Just let me just tell you what it is. Phase 1 was the hypnotism. That's how they sedate you. Phase 2 is this. Mental preparation. It's basically a psychological pre-op.
Pre-op?
For phase 3, the transplantation. Well, partial, actually. The piece of your brain connected to your nervous system needs to stay put, keeping those intricate connections intact. So you won't be gone. I mean, not completely. A sliver of you will still be in there somewhere. Limited consciousness. You'll be able to see and hear what your body is doing, but your existence will be as a passenger. An audience. You'll live in
the sunken place.
Now you're in the sunken place.
And welcome back to part 3 of Acid and Chaos, which makes part 9 of this series of Migration. You know, in the introduction to this series, Migration, I say that you've been sold into certain narratives since the time you were born into this world. But if you can remember your own childhood, you'll remember that this didn't happen all at once. This was a gradual process that took quite a bit of time. For most of us, our fondest memories are from our childhood. And you know, the average child laughs somewhere around 10 times more than the average adult does. And if you think about children, they're all artists. Every child colors, every child plays. They live their life with a kind of lightness and a spontaneity that we seem to lose in adulthood. And then we take a look at how hippies and stoners and psychonauts are often stereotyped as being almost childlike again. They are laughing much more often, just like they did when they were kids. They have a fascination with art again. They're often the creators, they're the musicians, they're the poets, they're the writers, and they seem to live their life with more of a spontaneity again. So what's going on here? Why is it that people who use psychoactives once again almost seem childlike? And is there possibly a dark side to all of that? Today we're going to be diving into those issues, as well as discussing how to make the most of your psychoactive trips. So sit back and stay tuned for part 9 of Migration. With over 30 years of first-hand experience with lucid dreaming, radical healing, astral projection, and paranormal states of consciousness, I've come to develop a unified theory about the mechanics behind all of these fantastic powers, which everyone has access to. I've learned that our consciousness is not a localized phenomenon. It only appears to be an isolated point of awareness living somewhere behind our eyes, because we've latched onto stories that have convinced us this is the case since we were born into this world. It is our very attachment to these narratives that appears to bind us to the cage of the physical mind and body. Through this series, we're embarking on an adventure to explore this relationship we carry with storylines and symbolism, so that we can, once and for all, dispel this faulty notion that our awareness, our true identity, has ever been limited and localized within the brain. I am not speaking of a supernatural gift that only the holy or the gifted can tap into. In fact, I'm personally an atheist. I'm referring to a perfectly natural phenomenon that most people won't realize until their physical body passes away. But why wait, when you can take advantage of your incredible potential now? Welcome to a journey to a brand new landscape. Welcome to Migration. So we first have to ask, why exactly is it that children do seem generally happier than adults? What exactly is going on there? Why do they create more? Why do they sing and dance and create without feeling the need to take any of it terribly seriously? Why are all children artists? Why are they all spontaneous? What's going on? What is so genuine about a child is really the ultimate question, and that's going to carry us into this discussion a lot deeper when we talk about the connections between our childhood and psychoactives. You could say that the answer comes down to that the weight of the world isn't yet on a child's shoulders. They're still young. They're not paying bills. They're not paying taxes. They're not dealing with rent and jobs and stress. But really what it comes down to is that children don't have a lot of internal stories yet weighing them down. They're still learning how to carry around their own internal dialogue. But, eventually, monkey see, monkey do. So those of you who have been around kids, those of you who have kids, know that somewhere along their development, you'll start noticing that they begin mimicking self-importance, the kind of self-importance that they see going on with the adults around them. You'll suddenly start seeing them at some point take some little story they have in their head, some situation that they're carrying around very importantly, and it can be kind of strange to watch because it's still a child and they're still dealing with child things. And so it's kind of strange to see a kid be all worked up over some issue that, from our perspective, might seem very petty. But of course, what begins as just a game of mimicking what you're seeing around you slowly becomes more and more real for you. It stops becoming a game and it slowly starts becoming something very serious. And this is what's happened to all of us. This is how we have all self-domesticated, if you will. And, slowly, this is how the magic drains out of our experience. But in the end, we're going to remember that all of this has all just been a game of pretend. From childhood all the way up into adulthood, we've picked up these behaviors of taking our narratives deadly seriously. And in the end, at some point, we're all going to realize that it has all just been a game of playing. It's all just been a massive game of mimicking what we're seeing around us. And in the end, we're going to laugh at ourselves, just like the Buddha did. And in the same way that a lucid dreamer eventually wakes up to the reality that, oh my gosh, this has all been a self-imposed construction of my own design. This is all just my own dream. I've been playing with these ideas that are just floating around in my head. When you become fully awake to those, you, of course, step into greater amounts of power. And this is the same thing that's happening in our daily life. Eventually, we're going to wake up and realize that it has also just been this massive game of pretend. And it's a massive game of pretend that's completely gotten out of hand. And eventually, we will realize this, that it's just something that we've lost control of. So for many of us, it's not until we have some experience where all of the weight of our narratives is in one way or another stripped away from us that we suddenly find ourselves laughing like we did when we were children, once again. And this is one way to describe the psychoactive state. There is suddenly a wonder brought back into your consciousness that you have not felt since childhood. And as we've been discussing in this trilogy, Acid and Chaos, we've been discussing how psychoactives do just that for us. They quiet the parts of our brain that deal with that obsessive, constant internal narratives that we are running through all the time, almost 24 hours a day, during the day, in our head, and in our dream states when we sleep. And depending on the type of hallucinogen and the dosage, this can feel like pure magic, in the same way that lucid dreaming can, or astral projection, or even a near-death experience, because at the core, all of those are essentially the same experience. It really all comes back to the exact same process that, in one way or another, energy is being pulled away from the part of the brain that deals with our obsessive context keeping. And of course, when that happens, it's like a veil is lifted, and suddenly we have an experience that we have not felt since we were children, as our brain is shut down to all of those parts that keep our world in that nice streamlined perspective. But of course, with any drug, the drug eventually does wear off, and everything eventually will go back to normal. Your brain will start processing just as it does habitually, and all of your narratives, all of your contexts are going to clamp down around you, just like it was before you took the hallucinogen. So as beautiful as those experiences may be, this is also where things get terribly confusing for us humans, because we enter these states where we suddenly remember that our consciousness seems to be open and expansive. We feel free. All of those boundaries that we had locked around us, suddenly seem like they're melting away. But later, the brain sees that experience as chaos. And if you've been paying attention to this series, you should know by now what the brain does with experiences of chaos. It'll take that memory that you had, that beautiful experience, it'll take it and it'll reconfigure it. It will edit it. It will break it down. It will smooth it out. It will find a way to make it fit into your world in a nice, neat, and tidy fashion. So it could be argued that process right there explains all of religion in a nutshell. It's a way to take an experience of pure truth and realization and turn it into a nice, neat, and tidy storyline that can be easily digested. And this happens all the time with people who first start experimenting with psychedelics. They have these indescribable experiences, these incredible visions and insights, and later the mind obsessively rushes to take that experience and crush it down into a nice narrative that can be easily explained and fits nicely into the rest of their worldview. What we are touching on here is one of the greatest pitfalls of the human mind. When you have an experience where you step outside of your mainstream narrative, there is a bliss to that. Whenever you move away from the tight controlling boundary that you have been living in, the storyline that you have been tied to, once you move outside of that, even just a little bit, there is a real freedom to that. There is a bliss to that. You get high off of that. But again, the problem is that later on we have this tendency to then take that experience and then again wrap it in yet another narrative, just like one of the narratives that we were trying to escape from to begin with. And then we have the audacity to point to the narrative that we made up, and we call that truth, not the experience itself. We call the narrative that we wrapped it in as truth. If you understand this dynamic, then you're going to understand everything from the idea of a bad trip, as we call them in the world of psychedelics. It also can explain cult behavior. It explains the extremists in terms of the spiritual and religious extremists, and even the conspiracy theorists.
You know what I noticed? Nobody panics when things go according to plan. Even if the plan is horrifying. If tomorrow I tell the press that, like, a gangbanger will get shot, or a truckload of soldiers will be blowing up, nobody panics. Because it's all part of the plan. But when I say that one little old mare will die, well, then everyone loses their minds. Introduce a little anarchy. Upset the established order, and everything becomes chaos. I'm an agent of chaos. Oh, and you know the thing about chaos? It's beer.
So, just like the Joker just reminded us, it doesn't matter whether or not the story is a nice story or not, whether it is a beautiful story or if it's a terrifying story, as long as it is some nice, neat, and tidy narrative that takes our chaos and puts it more in order, we would rather have that than just be left with pure chaos most of the time. So when you go into a psychedelic state, again, you may be experiencing these grand, beautiful openings of consciousness. You may be having these incredible otherworldly insights and visions that you can't quite describe. But then again, be prepared that your mind is going to want to describe them later. Your mind is going to want to somehow take all of those experiences and put it into some new context. In the case of the bad acid trip, that is exactly what's going on a smaller level. The person is simply going down a rabbit hole of negative thinking. They are becoming attached to one terrible narrative after the next, all in an effort to avoid the pure chaos that they are experiencing, or the chaos that they had already experienced. They are doing everything they can to wrap their experience in some kind of storyline. And again, even if the storyline is terrible, even if it's just the most dreadful narrative ever, it's still better to the mind than pure, boundaryless chaos. We should be very concerned about the person who comes back from even just one acid trip or even just their very first DMT experience and claim that they now have total access to the unfiltered truth. This can be very dangerous for a person because that person's going to now pick up a book or an ideology or some philosophy, and they're now going to become completely wrapped up in whatever new perspective that they just picked up, and they're going to call that the absolute truth at that point. I actually did a cartoon for the series Generation Jaydid, which I'll leave a link to below, which describes an experience I had a few years back when I went on this blind date with this girl. And during dinner, this woman was telling me that how excited she was because she said, I used to be just a fundamentalist Christian for years and years. That's how I was raised, and I was taught to see everything in black and white, and I was really, immediately judgmental about people, and, wasn't very happy. And so, then I realized later that, this isn't me. I'm a Leo. And, when I started looking at my star sign, when I started looking at my zodiac, I realized that, this isn't for me at all. I'm much more free than this, and I have much more power than this. And she asked me, she said, so, what's your zodiac sign? And I'm an Aries. And she just looked at me with horror and she said, oh, no. You need to take me home immediately. I thought she was joking at first. And I said, what are you talking about? She says, no, I'm a Leo and you're an Aries, and I've looked at, the star charts, and we will never get along at all. There's absolutely no way. There's not even a point for us to even continue this conversation. You should just go ahead and take me home. And, once I realized she was serious, I gladly did take her home. But, that's very common. We see that with a lot of people who they feel this liberation from breaking out of this this narrative that has chained them for so long. And what they do is they run straight into a brand new narrative. And that is the thing that the next one that keeps them chained down. And they don't even see the irony of it. They don't see that they've not changed any of their philosophy. They've not changed any of their behavior. All they've done is change the window dressing to their old storyline. And, we see this a lot. We talked about this in one of the last episodes, how we are, what is it that we're searching for all the time on our phones, on our screens? And in many ways, we are just jumping from one narrative to the next. We're looking for relief. We're looking for some sort of an escape, right? Well, an escape from what? We're looking for an escape from the imposing narrative that we are trapped within, right? And so what we're looking for is a different narrative, some little storyline, no matter how clever or cute or funny or stimulating it may be. We're looking for some other little narrative that we can escape from. And this is how many of us live our lives, jumping from one controlling narrative to the next. Of course, it's no secret that we are seeing this process in the United States of America right now, full blown. We are seeing people who are truly getting a rush. They are truly high off of this idea that they have moved away from the mainstream narrative. I mean, and there is a real high to it. You feel invigorated when you move away from the larger controlling mainstream story that is presented to us. And then, of course, they are running to something even crazier. And it doesn't matter what the new story is. The new story may be, I believe that the planets and the stars are in complete control of my destiny. Or the new story might look like, lizard aliens are actually have infiltrated every level of our government from around the world. Or it may look like, all of the Democrats, they're all pedophiles who are feeding on the blood of children. Whatever the story is, it doesn't matter, because all of it is the same dynamic that we're seeing again and again. We're getting high off of running from the old narrative, but then we are running directly into a brand new one and getting trapped by that one in the exact same way that we were trapped by the old one. Okay, so hopefully you can see that dynamic much more clearly right now, and hopefully you can start to see that same dynamic as it relates to you personally. But so what's the solution to this? How can we enter these states of expanded awareness and not go crazy? So here is the solution. Here is perhaps the most important piece of advice that you will ever hear to avoid these pitfalls that we've been talking about. You should give all of your attention, your faith, and your money to me and to me alone. Of course, any guru, any leader, any politician who is selling you on any story like that, you need to run. You need to run as fast as you can in the other direction. But seriously, how can we enter these states of expanded awareness that our mind identifies as pure chaos and not habitually run to some new narrative to contain it, which is just as problematic as the first one? The truth is that you have the solution right now. I just gave it to you. The more that you pay attention to this dynamic, the more that you pay attention to how people do that in society, how people do this around you, how you do this yourself, how you jump from storyline to storyline in search of escape from the old narratives, you'll start to catch yourself doing this. And this is how you avoid falling into this trap for yourself. Awareness is always the key. But when it comes to entering a psychedelic state, there are some basic guidelines that I want to hand to you. These are suggestions that I wish that I had when I was a teenager, first experimenting with these states of consciousness, lucid dreaming, astral projection, and also with psychedelics. But specifically with psychedelics, it is so important that you are aware when you are wrapping a new story around your experience. Simply listen to what's coming out of your mouth. pay attention to what is going on in your internal narrative about what you had just experienced, especially those experiences that seem like they have religious implications, that they seem mystical. Pay very close attention to the stories you start wrapping around those. And this really comes down to two basic notions when you are preparing for a psychedelic trip. And it all comes down to who you're with and what is around you. So let's start with who you're with. Who you trip around can be the most important aspect of your experience. You want to be very aware of who is around you at that point, who your friends are, who do you really trust. You would really want to avoid, if you are going into, say, your first acid trip for the first time, your first mushroom experience ever, you want to be very wary of people around you who tend to be very power hungry, tend to be possibly very dramatic with very strong personalities who really like to convince you of things, or people who are really sold into their own particular narrative of what is true. I would really recommend, for beginners especially, to avoid giant groups of people. And it can be therapeutic when you are going to see possibly just, music or something like that, and everyone is just kind of moving to the rhythm and just enjoying the instrumentals and whatnot. But you have to be very careful of group think when you're in that state of awareness, because you become very, very susceptible to any ideas that are just floating around you, and it can be really tough to combat a large, massive group of people who all kind of have the same basic attitude. So, you probably don't want to take acid and go to some white power convention is my suggestion. But seriously, today, where I'm at now, I very rarely will take any kind of psychoactives around other people at all. I will go out by myself. I'll go out into the woods. I'll go into the mountains. I'll go camping. I'll go spend the day by myself because, in that state, I just have to deal then with my own internal narrative. And the more you understand that, the more you understand how susceptible you are to other people's narratives coming into your consciousness, you start understanding why, traditionally speaking, the saints, the gurus, the monks, the medicine men of the world have often been loners. They're the ones who are living on the outskirts of civilization, and there's good reason for this. So the next piece of advice I have for you is being aware of what is around you, and by that I specifically mean media of any kind. That means devices that can carry information from the internet, movies, television, even books in some cases. I would really be careful of all of those at the beginning. I wouldn't sit down during an acid trip and watch a movie unless I was very seasoned and I knew how to incorporate that experience into my consciousness in a very healthy way. So get away from all of those temptations. You should get away from your phone when you go into these states, because again, your phone is still carrying all kinds of potentials for narratives. Perhaps right now your phone may be the most potential for getting you involved with a brand new storyline. So get away from your phone, and my God, get away from the video games. I know that that's something I see on the internet a lot, people talking about that they're doing mushrooms, doing LSD, and they're sitting and they're playing video games. You are literally, your mind is in a most beautiful state to break apart all of the narratives that you've been carrying, and you are then submersing yourself into a whole other constructed narrative. That's what video games are. It's a whole other world. They're becoming so complex. That's why we are drawn to them so much, because it's a world that has such nice, tight parameters, and we can go into these worlds and we can feel safe within them. They don't feel as boundaryless and as chaotic as our daily world. So go outside. That is my biggest suggestion. Get away from the media. Go outdoors. Go listen to the trees, listen to the wind. I would rather someone just spend their entire acid trip staring at the stars all night than staring at their phone. You're going to get so little out of your experience if you just bind yourself to another contained little narrative. The whole idea of psychedelics is to break out of all of the narratives, the ones that you are carrying, the ones that other people want to impose on you, the ones that are coming from your media. They come from a lot of directions. Right now we are, in fact, migrating into a new world that is media driven, like in a way that no other human on this planet has ever seen. It's why I call this series Migration. Because I'm trying to give you guys a solution to this problem that we are ingraining ourselves more and more day by day. So go outside, get away from it, get away from your house, get away from your living room. All of your belongings, your house, your room that you live in, all of your things are drenched in the story of your life. And it's a good idea to just back away from them from time to time. When you are stuck staring at the same four walls, when you are stuck staring at the exact same things around you day in and day out, that helps trap you within your storyline. It helps contain you within the same narrative that's been binding you day after day, week after week, year after year. So when you have the opportunity to truly break away from all of them, if you can, get away from all of your belongings, get away from your possessions, get away from your house. If you can, go outside, be with nature. That's my number one piece of advice to anyone who's going to start embarking on psychedelics for the first time. This plant medicine that is on our earth is here for a reason. We were not meant to take this medicine and stare at a screen, so use it wisely. Take my basic advice, be aware of who you're around and what you're around, and adapt it to your own needs. So that's all that we're going to discuss on psychedelics for right now. Of course, we're going to keep bringing up the topic of hallucinogens throughout this series. It's hard to avoid this topic entirely, but we needed to spend these 3 episodes focused directly on just exactly how psychoactives affect this specific state of consciousness that we are involved in here. So until next time, thanks so much for watching. Please like, please subscribe. That really does help this channel, and it helps me know that there are other people out there watching. And if you've got suggestions, if you've got input, if you've got questions, a lot of people have already been reaching out to me here or on Facebook or Twitter or whatnot. You are welcome to do that. Right now, I'm in a position where I can get to most people who have a legitimate question. Who, if you really have something that you want to share with me, I can get back to just about everybody. Give me time. It may take me a few days, so please be patient. But I'm trying to get around to absolutely anyone who has something that they want to share with me. So again, thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.